Right, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome, a very good morning to you. And it is a warm welcome because the sun is shining, which can only mean British summertime has finally arrived. And what better draw than to want to come and study in the United Kingdom than the fact that the sun is actually finally out and we are looking good in the shop window. But we have arrived at week 5 or the 5th one of our webinar series, and we've got a bit of a classic to finish on. One of the ones that we've used ever since the pandemic, ironically so. And today we are looking back into the medical school process as we do every year. But before I introduce our speaker for today, who is well known to many of you out there, I do just want to say two things. Number one is thank you for your time and engagement over the course of this webinar series. We enjoy doing them. It's become a bit of an annual event. It's our opportunity to give a bit of bit of training out there, a bit of thought leadership out there as well. If there is any topic that we have not covered this year that you might want further exploration into, we are going to do an MPW Talks offcuts over the course of the summer. In case there is anything you want to go through, perhaps it could be something on, just to pick some ideas here, something like navigating the clearing process or choosing A levels even last minute over the course of the summer, which is going to be relevant to students, your students, whichever school that they may be looking to attend. We are here, we are ready and raring to go. Just drop us some ideas either into the chat function or contact us here at MPW. But without further ado for this morning, because we've got a lot to get through, I'm going to introduce MPW's very own Dr. House, Mr. Adam Cross, who is currently seconded from Birmingham down to us here in sunny London at this moment in time. Adam, a very, very good morning to you. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thanks. Thanks for having me this morning, James.
No, thank you very much indeed to you. Without further ado, I'm going to pass over to you. Now, Adam sent out on the email this morning, the reminder email for this presentation, some materials. If you look back at that email that was sent to you about half an hour ago, you will see a link to click on for materials relevant to Adam's session today. Do click on that link, do download those materials, because if you would like to join in, you will need those materials. We will also put them into the chat function on this particular talk as Adam is talking, so you're able to access them from there. But without further ado, Adam, over to you.
Thank you very much, James. A warm welcome to all of you this morning. It's my pleasure to take a little bit of time to go through some of the principles of applying for medicine, dentistry and veterinary science. And as most of you probably know, the reason that we offer these webinars on this topic is that it's highly competitive to get entry into a UK medical, dental or veterinary science school. So this is really to try and broaden your understanding of the process. But this presentation that I do is really about trying to give you an insight into what it's like as a student. So we're going to think about this from the student's perspective this morning, because in my experience, in terms of empathizing with students and advising them, really knowing what they have to go through is the best way to help them. Just very quickly before we get started, I work at our Birmingham campus. So I'm based at MPW Birmingham, but I do a lot of work around the MPW group. I am the author of Getting into Dental and Getting into Medical School, which are well-known getting into guides. And this gives me a very unique perspective on the process, because as we update these titles on an annual basis, as we write new chapters, as we change information, as we tweak information, it means that we're constantly talking to medical and dental schools and vet schools as well, and getting the most up-to-date information about what's going on. So it allows us to have our ear to the ground and really pick up on those little hints and tips that are relevant, so we can then pass that on to our students and give them the best possible opportunity at gaining entry onto these courses. So I'm going to take you on a journey this morning. So over the next 45 minutes, we're going to go back in time and put ourselves in the shoes of being 18 once more. Now, I'm not going to tell you how many years ago that was for me, more than I'd like to admit. Hopefully, some of you are Doctor Who fans. So on the screen at the moment, we have Doctor Who's TARDIS, whisking us back in time to being 18. And like I say, this is all part and parcel of trying to put ourselves into the shoes of our 18-year-old students to see what it's like for them. Now, just to brighten your morning and maybe give you a laugh and to remind me how long ago this was for me, a little picture of me there at 18 years old. So you can see I haven't changed at all, exactly the same. It's not like I put on lots of weight and got loads of grey hairs or anything, but I'm going to join you on this journey back in time to being 18 in our TARDIS, and we're going to go through the process that we expect 18-year-olds to cope with, deal with, and thrive with to be successful applicants. So, this morning there's going to be a number of tasks for you to do. Now, obviously, when I'm in a room with people and doing this face to face, I will go around and circulate and talk to people doing this. So we loses maybe a little bit when you're remote, but I want you to engage with this because it's going to give you the most out of it. So what is the first thing that we expect our young people to do on this process? Well, we expect them to do research. We expect them to think about what they want out of their future, what they'd like to study, what career pathway they would like, and where they would like to study. And there are lots and lots of different resources that we point to our students to do this. And the first one and the main one that all students applying in this country have to use is the UCAS website. So UCAS is the central admission service for universities in this country. Now, there are some universities and some courses where international students can do direct applications to, but still the bulk of the process goes through UCAS. So what I would like you to do, just to put yourself in their shoes, in your head, be 18 again, and think, right, well, what might I like to study? If I could do it all over again, what I might like to study in terms of a subject, and where might I like to study? And I want you to visit the UCAS website at ucas.com and do a little bit of searching. I'm just going to spend 2 minutes on this. Do a little bit of searching, find a course, find a university that you might like to apply to, and find the entry requirements. And this doesn't have to be medicine and dentistry here. This can be anything. Think about what you might like to study, again, if you were back in that place. So I'm going to say 2 minutes here. This is to give you a feel for the first steps of that research process. So we're about a minute in, so keep going, keep looking. Just to give you a little bit of an insight into this, the research stage is massively important because what we find is that sometimes students can look at a university or base a decision on maybe information they've heard from someone else, or maybe mom or dad have said, oh, we want you to study at, University X. And what that can mean for some young people is that they don't always do their actual research, and they can then find that when they turn up to a university on day one of their course, it can be a real shock to them that it's actually not what they expected. Maybe the course isn't what they expected, the university isn't what they expected. So careful research, which this is the first step, is massively important. We took some of our students last week to 2 university open days. So really the next step on from this is visiting university open days and getting a feel for what's going on. Right, we've got 5 seconds left then. Right, so that is where we finish that first task. So, any thoughts? Anyone like to share anything in the chat that they found? Any hopes and dreams? Anything that they'd like to go back and study, or any information that they found that they would like to share? Please shout it out or add it to the chat. Another question for you as well. How did you find the website? Did you find it easy to navigate? Did you find it challenging? Was it easy to find the information that you wanted to find? Just while we're waiting for some responses to come through, although the UCAS system is a nationwide system for all UK and international applicants for universities in this country, it is a surprisingly modest-sized organisation. So it's not the biggest organisation, and that means that the resources on here, while they're up to date, the website isn't always sort of the most user-friendly to use. So it does take a little bit of practice to find your way around there. Okay. We'll have time for questions throughout and at the end. So if there is anything that comes up as we go through, or if there's anything specific you'd like to ask about each of these steps, please just drop it in the chat, and we can deal with those as we go through. Right. Oh, we won't have that alarm again. Task 2 then. So task 2, and this is what I want you to have a go at as well. So the first of the resources that's been shared with you is some mock questions for the UCAT test. Now, those of you that haven't heard of UCAT is the University Clinical Aptitude Test. So this is the pre-admissions test for medical and dental applicants to carry out to give admissions teams an insight into the levels of skills that applicants have. One of the reasons for talking through this morning is because the format of the UCAT has changed. So this year, so starting from sort of the summer period and for this admissions cycle, one of the previous sections in the UCAT test has been dropped. So what UCAT will look like for students from this year is they will have 4 sections of the test, and everyone applying to a UK dental or medical school will have to sit this test. So there are 3 test sections to start with that are known as the cognitive sections. So these are verbal reasoning, decision making, quantitative reasoning, and we're going to look at some examples of these, and I'm going to give you a little bit of experience this again, put you in the student's shoes. What's it like to sit this test? And then finally, number 4, which is a separate section, is situational judgment. And this is where students are asked questions about how they would deal with a particular situation, what they would do in a sort of clinical situation, for various scenarios. What students get from this is a numerical score, which is the total of the 3 cognitive tests, and then for the situational judgment, they get band 1 to 4. Now, one of the things about UCAT is the time pressure. So the test is purposefully done under time pressure. So students struggle to finish. They struggle to finish each section. They run out of time. They're panicking. They're stressed. And the idea of this is that it's trying to simulate the stress and the time pressure that you'd be under as a medical clinician. So we're going to have a think about these. So if you access the UCAT file that has been sent to you and has been put in the chat, we're going to have 4 minutes to do 4 questions. And this is about right for the timing of what you would actually get in the UCAT. So again, put yourself in the shoes of an 18-year-old. Think back to that. How would you feel at 18 if you were sitting this test under this immense amount of pressure in terms of time, under immense amounts of pressure because your application is going to depend at least partly on this? Have a think about how that feels, and then we'll have a look at some answers. Okay, so 4 minutes. Hopefully you've got the document open now. 4 minutes starts now.
Adam, just while people are doing this one, just a reflection on the UCAS website. It's exactly as you were sort of saying before. It feels very counterintuitive, the UCAS website. From a personal perception of it, it's got better over the course of time. But even now, it's one of those ones whereby you definitely need to use it for a while in order to understand it. It's like understanding a game for the first time, as opposed to it being something whereby you can just dip in and find everything you want. It still feels a little bit too clunky in a way. And from an international perspective, that can cause some difficulties. Just wondering if there were other resources people could flock to, or whether really UCAS really is still the go-to place and you just got to get used to it.
Yeah, it is clunky, and part of it is as you use it more and you get experience with it, you understand where to go to get the information you need. But
Yeah,
and there's so many resources on the website. There's so many little tools and little widgets that you can use, and it's really, really useful. But can be a little bit like trying to unlock a sort of a treasure chest to get to it. Ultimately, I would say that's the place to end up with your research, because ultimately your application has to go through that process. But outside of that, what is a very well-trodden path is to go and look directly at a university's website first. So it can go either way around. Either look at UCAS to get an idea of which universities you might be interested in and which courses, and then hop over to the university website and the specific course page. Or some students
yeah,
do it the other way around, and they start at the university website and then they'll end up on UCAS. But the university websites, are very, very good to go along with. But again, the caveat is that there are an awful lot of university websites that are quite difficult to navigate and get the information. Some are better than others. So I'd say it's about sort of holding hands between the two. But outside of that, I would say be very, very careful about other third-party resources, because often you'll get information that's out of date and hasn't been updated. So I sometimes have students that say, oh, I saw on this third-party website this information about a medical course, and it's 5 years out of date because the website hasn't been updated. So the university websites and the UCAS, although challenging to navigate sometimes, you're guaranteed to get the most up-to-date information.
lovely. Thank you very much for that one. And just before leaving you back into it, just a reminder, if people are looking for the materials that Adam's using and you didn't get them from the original email, if you have a look in the chat under the event group, there's a link to the materials there for you. I'll toggle myself back out.
Thanks, James. So yeah, 30 seconds left. So these 4 questions, about a minute per question. And like I say, think about how you would feel as an 18-year-old to be under this pressure. So 15 seconds left. Thankfully, you don't have someone sitting there counting the time down for you. I think that would just add to the stress. Although some students say that they wish they did have someone doing that so they could keep track of it. So 4, 3, 2, 1. And we're done. Right, so I'm going to talk you through these. So have a look at, if you've had a go at this, have a look at the answers that you've got. Hopefully you've had a go at some of these. First thing to say is that actually there is an element of guesswork with these questions for some of the sections more than others. This first section, the verbal reasoning section, actually is, I would say, the most challenging, and certainly for international students where English isn't their first language, this is very challenging. But you would be surprised. Actually, the majority of UK students that have grown up with English as their first language still struggle with this. And it's like a type of comprehension question, the verbal reasoning. This question then is asking, what can teleology be defined as? And in some comprehension exercises, academic comprehension, you would go to the passage and you would find the answer, where in that passage there would be somewhere that directly said teleology can be defined as, and it would give you the answer. This is one step above that. So this is not just about reading directly the answer from the passage. This is about understanding what's going on in the passage and then making a conclusion about which of these answers fits best. So there is an element of ambiguity. These questions are purposefully ambiguous. So this is one of the most challenging ones because you've got to read at speed, you've got to have a pretty good grasp of English, and you've got to be able to read in between the lines, as it were. Now, those of you that have attempted this, A is the correct answer. Now, I run whole separate sessions on looking at UCAT strategies and picking apart these answers. We're not going to do that this morning, but pat yourself on the back if you got that correct, and don't worry if you didn't. Section 2 then, your second question that I asked you to attempt is decision making. Now, this is the idea of logical thinking. So this is giving you information about a random scenario. This is just a nonsense scenario about, teachers sitting in a row. So just pure logic problem territory here. And what you have to do then is, using that information, you have to determine which of the following statements are true. So again, just to mark your own work, the answer here is A. So well done, anyone that's got 2 out of 4 so far. Section 3, most students say that this is their favourite section. So this is the quantitative reasoning, basically the maths section. And this is very much day-to-day maths in terms of what you can expect. So it's not about any higher level maths. It's not about calculus or trigonometry or any of those higher level things. This is about day-to-day maths. It involves things like percentages, ratios, multiplication, addition, subtraction, and so on. So a lot of students tend to do very well on this one, and I've had students in the past that out of a score of 900 have got well into the high 800s, and I've had a student with 900 out of 900 on this section before, which really can do wonders for the overall score. Now the answer here is B. So again, well done if you've got that one correct. And that's the 3 sections. So that's one example question from each of those 3 sections. In terms of the situational judgment, you can see this is a little bit more into the world of sort of medicine, dentistry. They don't have to be though. So, these can just be everyday scenarios, but you do tend to find some more medical-based scenarios here. And what this question is asking is about appropriateness of an action. So it's saying, right, well, here's your scenario. If someone in this situation does or doesn't do this, how appropriate is it? And this is where the answer here is C. So the answer here is this action is inappropriate but not awful. And this very much builds on a student's knowledge of medical ethics. What tends to make a difference here is where students have got a wider view of the world. So where they've had experience, work experience, even if it's not medical work experience, but they've been out in the world of work, they've worked with people, they've had that wider exposure, that can often do wonders for how a student responds to this. And then the idea of medical ethics and a student being up to date on medical ethics and the ethical framework that doctors and dentists and vets work in, that really can help as well. Now, we have got this picture, and I think we probably all know Lisa Simpson. And I chose this one because this is usually when students come back to see me after their UCAT. This is usually how they present to me. So UCAT is done at an external test centre. So students have to go to an external test centre. So they have to go and sit in a completely unknown environment, sit down at the computer, they do the test, and they've gone through probably what is the hardest test they've ever done. And they come back to me and they say, I wanted to run away. A lot of them say, well, at the end of the first section, I just thought I'd done so badly. I wanted to run away. I didn't think there's any point carrying on. And so they come out and they really have been put through the mill with this. And this is part and parcel of the test. So part of our preparation with students is actually saying to them, look, you're going to have a hard time on this. You need to be psychologically resilient. Hopefully you've got a feel just from those 4 questions in 4 minutes and marking your own answers. You've got a feel for actually the challenges that students face on this. Right, so task 3. Next thing then, that we need to get students to do is to write a personal statement for their application. So one of the reasons for focusing on this morning is because the personal statement is also changing. And this is where this ever-evolving picture of the admissions process, it's really, really important when you're advising students to understand that. So UCAT has changed this year and dropped a section. The personal statement is changing this year on UCAS applications. And it's gone from being a 4,000 character block of text to being now split across these three subject headings that are on the screen. So students now write in 3 boxes. They still have the same overall character limit, so they still encouraged to write up to sort of 1 page of typed text, but split between these 3 boxes. The rationale for this is to try and make it a little bit more accessible to students, and certainly for international students, this extra bit of sort of framework that they have, I think, will really benefit their personal statements. So again, I'm going to give you just 2 minutes just to have a think about this. This could be, imagine from step 1, from task 1, I asked you to find a course that you'd like to go back to uni to study. So if I was going back to uni again, I would like to study, I think, psychology. So I quite like to study psychology at King's College London. And so I'm going to be thinking here about, well, what might I answer in response to these questions if I was applying to study psychology at King's? So the first box is, why do you want to study the course or the subject? So I'd be reflecting on, what are my reasons? Why am I interested in that? Why psychology? Why not something else? Second box, how have my qualifications and studies helped me to prepare for this course or subject? So I'm going to be reflecting on what I've learned at GCSE and A level. I'm going to be reflecting on maybe wider reading that I've done. Maybe I went to see a lecture about psychology at the University of Birmingham last month, and I've got something interesting to talk about there. So that's the second paragraph, reflection on the academic studies and the wider sort of academic knowledge. And then finally, what else have I done to prepare? This could be work experience, this could be extracurricular, it could be involvement in clubs or, you know, responsibilities at school or college, anything like that. And then importantly, why are these experiences useful? So it has to be linked back. I'm going to be thinking, right, well, why is that going to be beneficial to me studying psychology at King's College London? So 2 minutes of reflection time for this. And then when we get about a minute in, I'll tell you a little bit about how we do this at MPW and how we make a difference to our students, because this really can be a really challenging hurdle for students to get over. So yeah, have a go, have a think, and then I'll give you some further insight about a minute in.
Adam, have you found life easier since the BMAT disappeared?
Oh gosh, yeah, 100%. So yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that actually. So prior to, just in terms of pre-admissions tests, prior to the year before last, and before that, there was another pre-admissions test called the BMAT, which many of you probably know about. The BMAT ended and is now no longer a thing. And what we've seen is that all of the previous universities that used BMAT have just jumped over to UCAT. So we weren't sure. There was some talk about maybe some of the bigger universities, prestigious ones, making their own pre-admissions tests, but everyone's just jumped over to UCAT. But certainly makes life for students a lot easier because they haven't got to be thinking about preparing for BMAT and UCAT at the same time. And BMAT was always tested at the worst possible time of the academic year. So yeah, good thing that BMAT has gone.
Fantastic.
So 1 more minute of reflection on this to think about. But at MPW, one of the things that makes massive difference to students writing personal statement is the individual guidance and support that students are given. So we could sit students in big lecture theatres and they could do webinars and big group seminars. for hours and hours and hours of time. But what makes the difference with a student and their personal statement, and actually with every part of their application, is that we give lots and lots of one-to-one support. So students giving us drafts and redrafts is an important part of this. Right, I'm going to stop that annoying alarm there. So yeah, we find that with applicants to these really, really competitive courses, we might go through a process of between 10 and 20 drafts and redrafts. And what that would look like from a student's perspective is they would have an attempt based on the guidance we give them. They would submit a first draft to their pastoral or academic tutor that's working with them. And then they would look through, give feedback, and that would go back to the student. And the feedback would be like, well, what about this? Can you expand on this? Or you've missed this area out? Or what about how you phrased this line? And so giving those very, very detailed points of feedback, then the student takes that away, makes those changes, and comes back with another draft. And back and forth you go. And it's a little bit like table tennis, it's personal statement ping pong. You're going back and forward, and like I said, I think my record is somewhere up to 20, where it takes a lot of work. Most students don't need that much help, but everyone needs that to make sure they've got high quality application. Now, one thing to mention before we move on to task 4, and the question that every student wants to know a definitive answer to, is can I use AI to help with my personal statement? And the answer is yes and no. So students can use AI platforms to generate ideas, to maybe do sort of proofreading or suggestions about how to phrase something. But students have to be aware that they can't just rely on an AI platform to write their statement. Now, we would all agree that students could do that. They could go and they could just type in, write a personal statement for me, this long, answer these questions for this subject, and it could churn something out. We really don't know how sophisticated the checking software is that UCAS use, but they do have checking software for plagiarism, and they say they've got checking software to sort of monitor for overuse of AI. So although it might seem like a really easy win, students need to make sure that they avoid just wholesale use of AI platforms to write their personal statement. What we tend to find with AI, as we've experimented with it for this, we just find it gives very, very bland, dull personal statements, and that's not going to be of benefit to anyone. So even if it does get past the detection software, it's not going to read, fantastically well. So it needs to reflect the individual's personality. Right, so point number 1 of feedback on this that students give us, and maybe that's what you would say to me, is actually it can be really hard to get started on this. So to think through these reasons, that's where the challenge is. So that first step tends to be the hardest. Right, okay, ready to move on then. So task 4. Oh, sorry, missed a slide here. Just got an example here. This is from one of my students from recent years. This student is now studying dentistry at the University of Birmingham. Did phenomenally well to get a place there. Very, very difficult course to get into. But we can see ultimately the level of sophistication that's needed in a top quality personal statement. So you can see here we've got technical language being used. We've got reflection on experiences, not just describing, but explaining and reflecting on, what they saw in their work experience. Really, this is that sort of first paragraph relates to that first question of why they want to study. Go on to talk about work experience and, what they've learned from that. And you can again just see how well written, how technical, quality of English. And this wasn't a student that was absolutely outstanding at English. This is a student that just had, very, very careful guided help for them to write it and to get to this level. So we didn't write this for the student. It's not about doing that, but it's about, guiding them through and pointing them in the direction, to get to this place. Right, so moving on. So a student has found the university they want to go to. They've sat the pre-admissions test. They have written a personal statement. They've submitted their application. Now, their application is going to get judged, and hopefully they're going to get invited to attend an interview. So all medical and dental schools have interviews of one sort or another, and this is so that they can see if the student that's presenting on their application on paper is the same as the person that they actually are. So in terms of interviews, these are really anxiety inducing for students. Even the most confident students really, worry about this, in advance, because it's really putting them out of their comfort zone. In terms of the types of interviews a student might attend, so we have panel interviews. This is your traditional job interview type of interview. You go into a room, you sit down, and there's between 2 and 4 people sat there, and they ask you questions, and you reply, and they ask you another question, and that goes on for about 20 minutes. The other type of interview, which is more likely for a student, is a multiple mini interview or an MMI. And an MMI, we can see here a picture from an actual university MMI. A student visits one interview station. They get given a task or they get asked a question, and then they perform that task or answer the question in usually 5 to 7 minutes. And then the interviewer gives them a mark, and then time up, and then on to the next station to do another task. What we find in multiple mini interviews is they test a broader range of skills than a panel interview. And that's some of the things that I'm going to show to you and get you to have a go at in the next few minutes. Since COVID, we were expecting the bulk of the interviews to go back to in-person interviews. What we've actually found, though, is that all universities went to online interviewing during COVID, and actually there's a significant number that have retained online interviews. Most have gone back to face-to-face, but students can, if we add that another layer to this, really, students can expect a mixture of online and face-to-face interviews for both panel and MMI. So something to watch out for. Personally, I think face-to-face interviews are much better. Students perhaps in advance think that they're going to be harder, but I tend to find that students perform better when they're actually there in person rather than behind a screen. So we're going to have a look at a couple of interviews. So again, back into 18-year-old mode, back in our time traveling device, you are at a university interview, let's say for medicine, and you've gone to the first station, and this first station is an ethical scenario. So these stations, some of them are just asking questions like, why do you want to study medicine or dentistry, or why do you want to come to this university? But we see a much broader range of skills being tested. So ethical scenario, you're at the station and they give you these details. And I want you to spend a minute or two just thinking about what you would do. So a 5-year-old patient comes in with severe abdominal pain, requires their appendix to be extracted. On speaking to the child's mother, they refuse to give consent for the operation and do not believe that the child has anything wrong with them. So what a student would be asked here is, what issues does it raise and how would you deal with the situation? Now, I'm not going to put any of you on the spot here, but I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to have a think about this. But James, our host, James, I'm going to put you on the spot here. You're going to be our interviewee for this one. So I'm going to... James is probably going to kill me for this, but we'll see what thoughts James has, and then we can maybe judge his response. So 2 minutes, have a think. So while we're thinking about this then, a couple of resources that I point students in the direction of is some of the ethical guidelines and handbooks that are out there in the medical community. So the British Medical Association has some excellent resources on their website, which are aimed at sort of ethical guidance for medical students. For prospective dentists, there's a document called Standards for the Dental Team from the GDC, the General Dental Council, which are very, very easy. It looks like a big document to read, but actually very, very easy to read, very, very clear English. But lots of very good medical ethics guidance out there and freely available from these big sort of regulatory bodies for the medical and dental profession. Right, okay. So, James, you're my interviewee.
Yeah, I am indeed.
What would you think the issues would be in this situation? What might you suggest?
Well, look, from my superficial understanding here, Adam, I mean, obviously the most important thing in this situation is the child and the health of the child and the condition they're in when they come in. I think what the doctor needs to understand is why the child's mother is refusing consent and try and get a little bit more out of that. My understanding, whether I'm right or wrong on this, is that for if you're under a certain age, obviously you need parental consent, but you only need one parent's consent. So to actually try and seek one or the other parent's consent might actually be a good way forward within this. But from a doctor's point of view, what you need to do is to lay out in front of the parents exactly what the situation is, what the ramifications and the repercussions might be, what the situation is for the child, what could be the consequences if they don't have the operation, and really discuss, talk through it, and try and get them to actually understand it from that particular point of view before taking any other courses of action. There is a legal framework in place that supports doctors being able to try and take this further if they can't get consent from the parent, but actually to try and bring another member of the family in to try and help and guide and discuss. Maybe there's religious reasons for it. Maybe it's a financial reason. Maybe it's something, but it's just to try and understand that situation a little bit better. But really, it's trying to work as quickly as possible in the interest of the child to outline the facts and to try and get it done, not amicably, that's the wrong word, but you know what I mean, before actually trying to take it any further from there. But it could be a religious reason, and that often is quite a situation that arises quite a lot in the UK system nowadays, in terms of what people's views are versus what doctors are actually able to do. As a starter for 10, that's where I go on this ethical scenario on the spot.
James, have you ever considered being a medical professional? Because that's I mean, that's an outstanding answer. And I think what James's response there gives you an insight into is that when we're preparing young people for the application process, yes, there is some specialist knowledge required. So yes, reading up, some specialist medical ethics sort of guidance, can really add to someone's answer. But James's answer is excellent there because it takes into account a broader perspective of society in the UK. It's very well considered. It's a very balanced approach, and what James has shown there is his sort of thought processes, and that's exactly what they want to see. So it's really about, I would expect nothing else from James, being a sort of an intellectual powerhouse. So but it's a fantastic answer. And we can see that students, it's about the wider experience, the wider reading, the wider understanding of the world that can really help with this. So that's a fantastic answer, James. So thank you for that. But hopefully everyone can see that this is, not easy. It's a lot to expect of an 18-year-old. I could not have given an answer like that at the age of 18 without help and support and guidance and so on. Just to jump back into the idea of, well, what do we do different at MPW? Again, we do group sessions. We do sort of group sessions. We sit everyone in a classroom and we lecture and we teach about these skills. But where the difference is made, again, is the one-to-one. So I spend, I would say, 1 year I'll keep track of this, but I spend, I'd say, roughly 150 to 200 hours a year doing mock interview preparation with our students. And that is a number of sessions for a number of students. So sitting down with them and one-to-one drilling them on these questions, guiding them through, giving them mock interview practice. That really is how the difference is made. And that's why we have really, really high success rates of international students performing well at interviews and getting offers on these competitive courses. So we've done station one. James has absolutely 5 out of 5 on this one. He stands up, off he goes to the next station. And actually, we've got something completely different now. So we're now not talking about ethics. We're not doing a talking station. We're now showing our manual dexterity. So this is all of these that we're talking about. These are things that have been done at interviews, medical and dental interviews in recent years. This one is an origami station. So what you have got, sorry, I've started the timer there. I'll stop that. In the documents that you were sent, there is an instruction sheet on how to make an origami frog. And this is to try and get students to demonstrate their manual dexterity, their ability to work with their hands. So they'd be given a sheet of paper, they'd be given some instructions, and they'd be asked in a time period to have a go at this. Now, some interviews give this information in advance and they say, well, practice this and you're going to have to do this. But some will just throw students straight in the deep end and expect them to do it there and then, and it's the first time they've seen it. So if you've got the document open and you've got a piece of paper, grab a piece of paper. It can be any piece of paper. And we're just going to say a couple of minutes just to see how you can do on following this. And I'm going to give you a minute or two to get your head into gear. And then I'm going to tell you some of the other things that can happen on this station. Now, I'm going to give us 2 minutes on this. So you won't get it finished in 2 minutes. But I want you to have a go, see what you can do. Again, when I deliver this session, do interview skills face to face, it's fascinating to see different people's approaches to doing this. It really is, and especially where you've got lots of people in a room doing it together. Fascinating to see how people approach this, who stays calm and who panics, and yeah, the different approaches to being put under stress. Really interesting to see.
Adam, what sort of skills can students be doing throughout their sort of education and outside of school in order to build their manual dexterity? I know music's a good one. I think I heard recently that computer games are quite a useful one for manual dexterity. Is there a grain of truth in that?
There is. I think that it would. What students can get confused with here is the difference between manual dexterity and hand-eye coordination. And what they're looking for here is to imagine a surgeon manipulating, some very, very intricate apparatus. I don't know whether anyone's seen it on social media, but there's sort of quite a well-used sort of clip on social media of a doctor using laparoscopic tools to do origami on this tiny piece of paper. And it's that idea of working in very, very intricate detail. So I would say really, really good examples of things that could do some things like model making, painting, sort of painting of miniatures, or painting on a canvas. Things like intricate cake decorating, sort of intricate art patterns. Some students use like henna tattoos and the very intricate designs there. They tend to be the best ones to do. I think that there is an argument for computer games, and certainly computer games can be very useful, but I think an interviewer might struggle to think of that, take that serious, unless there's very,
clutching
very
at straws
specific,
a little bit.
maybe clutching at straws. Yeah, absolutely. Commonly, I get students saying, right, well, I play the piano. And while piano is great for hand-eye coordination, and certainly if a student has achieved something with piano in terms of the grading system, it should be definitely put in, but not quite hitting that point of manual dexterity, I would say. One last thing, while hopefully some of you are having a go at this, one of the other things that can complicate this is that interviewers will actually be asking questions during this. And so sometimes the point of this exercise is partially manual dexterity, but Some interviews actually don't care how far you get with the origami, for example. As long as you don't give up and you're trying to follow the instructions, they don't really care, because they're just seeing how do you cope with pressure. So I might be saying to you, while you're doing this, tell me, where are you going on holiday this year? Or what have you enjoyed studying? Or can you tell me about something you've read in relation to medicine or dentistry recently, that you've been particularly interested in? Or tell me about your family, or what's your favorite sandwich? And so you're having to maintain that conversation while you're under pressure, trying to follow these steps. And think about doctors and dentists and medical professionals. That's key to what they do. You're a doctor in a hospital, you're talking to a patient, you've got a nurse asking something of you, someone screaming in pain, on the ward that you're on, or all of these things all going on at once. So this is about seeing if students, as prospective medical professionals, can cope with that. Now, if anyone has done a wonderful job of this, and wants to send us a picture, I have a little sort of gallery of best attempts at this, then please do send some through to the chat, and we can have a look at them. So that is an example of another interview station. So usually, one more. This is one I'm just going to signpost to you as a potential station as well, but one that really works best in person. But I've attached to the document a blank copy of this maze, and so please go away and try it. Use it with a colleague, again, just to get a feel for what students are put through. So this is a giving instructions station. So you've got up from your origami station, you've gone on to the third station, and the interviewer says to you, I'm going to put a blindfold on, and you are going to give me instructions using a pen, and I'm going to try and get out of this maze. And they can't see it, and it's going to be based purely on your verbal instructions as an interviewee. And there's lots of different takes on this. So some common ones as well is using building blocks, where you have to give instructions to the interviewer on how to arrange these building blocks, or Lego blocks, or things like that, and you have to make a certain pattern or shape, or rearranging tiles to make a certain shape. Lots of different takes on this from different universities, but what they all have in common is, can you give clear instructions to someone? And again, think about yourself as a surgeon, for example. You are guiding a student surgeon to take out someone's appendix, and they're doing the process, but you're telling them what to do. So very clear verbal instructions being tested here. Right. So hopefully up to this point then you've got an idea, and I hope you felt some of that stress that our young people sort of go through when they do this. So we are researching, visiting unis, we're preparing for UCAT, we are putting the application in, writing a personal statement, putting all those things together. On top of that then, voluntary work and work experience. Students have to be doing this for their application. They have to visit universities, and if you want to go and see a university, let's say you're based in London and you want to go and see Edinburgh University, it's a big commitment. You're preparing and practicing for the UCAT. We say to our students, try and spend an hour a day on UCAT preparation over the summer period before you sit the test. We're still expecting them to read widely about current affairs in the world of medicine, dentistry, vet science, and so on, because they need to be well informed about that. And then on top of that, they've got to carry on with their academic work. So there are so many parts of this process. And yes, I am a bit stressed as a student. That's what our students say to us. How's this going? How's that going? And like, oh, I've got so many things to do. I've got to do this. I've got to do this. I've got to do this. So this is it's a stressful time. Why does this work at MPW? Well, again, I'm going to sound like, just repeating myself here. It's that individual care and attention to our students that makes this manageable. Our students are not expected to go through this process on their own. They're expected to work with us. They're expected us to work hard and give us everything that they've got. but this is about a partnership with our students. And we know that when students come from halfway around the world to study in the UK and to study at MPW, that's another level of stress on top of this. We know that. And so what we do, we try to act as that parent, in that parent role, where we're guiding, we're the sort of the experienced parent in this situation, where we guide them through the process, but we provide them with the conversations, the discussions about stress, the discussions about managing workload and being organized. And we're the ones that listen to them, and we're the ones that mop up their tears when they've got lots to do. And we work very, very hard on that. The team that I work with in Birmingham, and I know this is mirrored in Cambridge and London, we work so hard with our students on an international basis, and our domestic students as well, on a day-to-day basis, to give them the support and the guidance and the advice that they need. But this is an inherently stressful process that I hope that you can feel. Now, I could talk to you for hours about this, and I could tell you from my perspective, but what speaks the most is listening to our student voices. So what I've included here is just a couple of minutes sort of student story in their own words about their time at MPW and Birmingham in this case, and going through that process, the academic process, but also the medical process. So hopefully this will just be the final part of our conversation today, that you can see from a student perspective how this works.
Hi, my name is Arsha Aryana Nugraha from Indonesia. I studied the NCUK International Foundation Year Program at MPW Birmingham, and I received 4 A stars and another A star for my EPQ. So I was a medical school applicant, and I am an upcoming student at Queen Mary Malta campus for medicine, and MPW was there every step of the way of me applying to med schools. For example, they gave me UCAT tutoring, and then they also helped me revise my personal statement, and then they also were very open if, for example, I asked for any medical school interview tips and practice. And they also did an MMI mock, at least for MPW Birmingham, they did an MMI mock with all of the medical school applicants in the college. And it really helped me in actually preparing for the actual MMI. So they were very supportive in terms of that. And in general, they were like all of the teachers were super supportive, especially my personal tutor, my PT. I was super lucky because he was also a chemistry teacher, so I could ask him any kinds of chemistry questions if I had any doubts, especially when it comes to organic chemistry and such things like that. So yeah, and he was always there. And I am very sure that other personal tutors are also like that. And what I like about the way they teach at MPW is the fact that they give you booklets for every session. So I didn't need to look for things to study. The revisions are just like, it was always there for me, and I just needed to do it. And the classes were very small. For me, my classes were only like 5 to 6 students in terms of size, so it really helped me in focusing better, as well as grasping knowledge. It was just a lot easier, and that was very beneficial because I needed to make sure that my grades were high. And what I noticed about MPW in terms of the way they teach and how they are as a college, rather than my other schools, like my other high school, they were very attentive, and they cater to different kinds of needs specific to the student. For example, if you are a medical school applicant or if you are a law school applicant, they would always cater to your needs, and that's what I really like about MPW. I would definitely recommend MPW, especially for international students, because I was an international student myself, and my personal tutor and the whole college were just very attentive, and they just wanted to make sure that I had a smooth transition in terms of studying abroad. And on top of the great quality of teaching that they provide, as well as the facilities and services that they provide, MPW would always be there for you. They would always give you any kinds of guidance and service and support that you need. So I would definitely recommend this college, especially if you are targeting a really great university in the UK, even including Oxford or Cambridge. MPW was my first experience in which the school felt more like a family because I was super comfortable, especially with my PT. I could ask him things and I could go to him for problems that were even outside of college, outside of school. And he would always be there for me and he would always ask for updates regarding issues that I talked to him about. So yeah, that's something that I didn't get from my previous schools. And that is something that I really value from studying at MPW.
Right. So I couldn't say it better myself. So I think that's the perfect place to end. Thank you all so much for joining me this morning. Hopefully that's given you that insight into the stresses that our prospective doctors, dentists, and vets have in their lives, and hopefully that can just help you in terms of guidance and advice for the young people that you're advising. I think we have a little bit of time for some questions, if there are any questions that anyone would like to ask.
We do. Look, Adam, first and foremost, thank you very much indeed. A lesson in stress management from the calmest man in the world. So it's hugely appreciated, particularly with all the hats that you have to wear. And you've done this for quite a long time now, and you've had to respond with all the changes year on year. And it still continues to go from strength to strength as a program. There's a few questions that have come up from the back end of this. And if I take the first one off the back end of that video, the question that was asked was, how difficult is it to be an international student and trying to get into medicine in the UK versus the domestic? And obviously there's a more of a slant towards domestic, but is it still as difficult as it was in the past? Is there an advantage to people studying here first, therefore, in order to offset that? Or will they always just be an international student and it will always just be hard with quotas?
It is challenging. Certainly the things, definitely studying here, it really does help. And what we found is that that's just in terms of getting used to, the way the country is, issues that on a day-to-day basis affect things like the National Health Service and so on. That's really useful, and that tends to put students at an improved position for things like performance at interview. Just speaking English in the UK, being around UK students and having that exposure language-wise is massively important for UCAT and for the academic work and for interviews. So yeah, I would say it does put them at an advantage, but it is still challenging. The challenges are the same for all applicants. I would say what has helped is there are a group of medical schools where they are more understanding of the challenges that international applicants face. So we've had, I'd say in recent years, past 5-10 years, I think how things have become, there've been more pathways that are open that can be successfully taken by international students for medicine in particular. So dentistry is a little bit more of a challenge at the moment, but that is something that's mirrored for UK students. So while the medical schools in the UK have gone through this expansion in the past 10 years, where we've had a significant number of new medical schools come into play, there's been no new dental schools. And so what we're seeing now is UK students and international students finding entry into dentistry just even more challenging.
Really? Oh dear. Okay. One of the things you mentioned there was sort of understanding the challenges of the National Health Service and all of these sorts of things. One thing I've always found whenever you've done these interviews is you sort of say to someone, tell me what's wrong with the National Health Service, and someone will sit there and rattle off everything that's wrong that they've read on the news for about 5, 10 minutes. And then the inevitable question at the end of that is, well, if it's so broken, why on earth do you want to come and work in it? With the fact that it's a trick question, isn't it? Which is really to actually try and pinpoint the fact it's a victim of its own success and all these sorts of things. The thing I just wanted to highlight in this really is that when you are trying to be an international student coming to want to study in the UK, be careful what you read always on the news about the National Health Service, because it's always political in its own way. It's always being written to seem like there's an agenda or a problem, but the National Health Service has a lot of great virtues to it. So dig a little bit more into it. Shameless plug here, read Adam's book. There's a nice bit on the National Health Service in there, which is a lot less biased, but do actually try and see the positives in this country and not the negatives that you will always find if you want to read the news. Is it better for a foundation student, question coming through here, to do the UCAT in the summer or after they arrive in the UK in September?
I would say for anyone, it's leaving as much preparation time as possible. So certainly, there's not really anyone that I would advise to do it early.
Okay.
There's nothing to be gained. It's not that you have a harder test the later you leave it. Nothing like that. The test is exactly the same, same level, regardless of when you sit it. So really, I would say leave it as late as possible. Sort of start of September is about right, as long as a student can manage all of those things coming together at once. So obviously, if a student feels that traveling to the UK, settling in, and getting ready for the academic year, if they feel that that's enough for them to cope with mentally, then maybe do it a little bit before they arrive. But in reality, try and leave as much time as possible. Like I said during the presentation, we advise students to do little and often with preparation. So it's not the sort of test that responds to doing, let's say, 20 hours preparation in 2 days before the test. It's much better 1 hour per day for 20 days. It builds much stronger skills for that.
Fantastic. Okay. I know you touched upon it in your talk, but just a refresher for people if they're joining late in terms of where they can practice for the UCAT test, any good resources over the summer?
Yeah, so the UCAT website is the only authorised preparation materials. So ucat.ac.uk has big banks of practice questions, practice tests, sort of guidance sort of presentations, and that really should be the first port of call. There are endless number of third-party providers that offer support and advice. They are useful, but none of them are authorized by UCAT. So students, there are so many out there, and students tend to look around, see which one that they like the look of, which one they think gives the best feedback. But ultimately, it's the actual official test preparation materials on the UCAT website that should be the first port of call.
Fantastic. Universities, what sort of universities have students recently progressed to for medicine, from Birmingham, for example?
Yeah, we've got students that really go everywhere. So we have in terms of the UK, a student that I've been working with this year has just had an unconditional offer for medicine at King's College London. We have students, I mean, yeah, we can send out a list of our destinations, but across the group, we have students go to, you name it, and we've got students that's gone there in recent years.
Yeah.
Some of our international students where they haven't maybe performed as well on something like the UCAT, we've had lots of success with universities like the University of Central Lancashire, Brunel, universities that we've got very good working relationships with, to get students to understand, any bits of application that aren't quite up to standard for an international student. But yeah, I think it's something that definitely the marketing team can sort of send out some destinations, because I'd be be here all day listing the different unis.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, the key really is, look, to the person asking the question, we don't have any bias towards one university over another, even from geographical location. It also doesn't mean we have a natural in because we're next door to those unis. It really is dependent on the student themselves. Leading
We
off the
also,
back
sorry,
of that,
James, sorry
sorry, yeah.
to interrupt. So we also have, our students go all around the world as well. So we help and support with applications anywhere around the world. So every year I'll have a group of students that are applying to Hong Kong, China, Australia, India, Malta, you name it. And that's something, although those applications are completely separate to UCAS, we do all of the legwork with the students on that as well to support them.
Always makes us feel bad, doesn't it, Adam, when people are saying, "Oh, I want to go off and study in China and Australia and Hong Kong and all these," and we're sort of sat here on a grey miserable day in the UK at that moment. But you know
Gosh, yeah,
what?
I'd
People's
love to
choice.
study in Australia. Yeah.
Dealer's choice out there. I mean, it is an interesting one. No matter where you read now, the difference in terms of the number of universities quoted to doing medicine in the UK now. It used to be a stable sort of 36. Now you read one site and it's 42. Another one will say 37. There's no real sort of concrete thought from people on these ones now because of the emergence of so many private universities that come through into play in the UK on these. Question that led off the back of all this was in recent years, and it was the case for a while, you had lots of different types of courses. You had your traditional course, you had your integrated course, your problem-based learning, case-based learning at times, whatever people want to call it. Now, where we are 2025, 2026, are those courses becoming more of the same? Is there a lot more commonality nowadays, or are they still very much pulled apart?
Yeah, they're a lot more homogenous than they used to be. So what you'll find is that most universities have an integrated approach to their teaching. So we had, 10, 15 years ago, big spike in courses that were only problem-based learning, and that was it.
Right.
That has been toned down. So yeah, largely they are integrated where you definitely get problem-based learning, case-based learning, obviously independent learning, but also with lectures, seminars, labs, and so on. So yeah, it's I think it's a much healthier situation now than when PBL first came on the scene. And there were some unis like Liverpool, for example, that just did completely PBL courses, and as a real challenge. And I think they've seen, as time has gone on, that that's not been responding to the best needs of the students or producing the best medical professionals.
Lovely, thank you. Very bizarrely, in the past few years, out of COVID, you've seen a few medical schools that have appeared in clearing, which is surely an anomaly. How do people approach that? Is that for first-time students, or is that really for students who were already in the system, have already been through everything else? Is it the same sort of interview process and all that? Do you know if Liverpool, for example, which has appeared in clearing in recent times, comes up? Do they have to go through all of this again, or is it only for those who've been through it and now need to be re-interviewed, I suppose?
So usually on results day, you might get some universities that formally advertise clearing places for medicine. What you also get though, and what can be very useful, is you get an almost informal cherry picking of students on results day by medical schools. So it's something that if a student has put in an application, just to university, it doesn't need to necessarily be to that university, and they haven't got any offers, but then on results day they get a very good set of results. Let's say they get 3 A's or above in their A levels, but they hadn't had an offer to study medicine. Then what we encourage them to do and what we help with on results day is for these students to ring around the different medical schools, and it's something they need to give sort of 2 hours of their time to it. And we would say, and one of the things about MPW is all of our staff are there on results day. We're not on holiday. We're back there, in the trenches, helping our students. And we advise them to ring around the universities and have a discussion with the admissions teams for medicine. So one example, I had a student in September, in August, so results day just gone, and she got A-star AA in economics, biology and chemistry. And she'd had a couple of interviews for medicine, but hadn't been made an offer. So she then still wanted to be a doctor. We encouraged her on results day to come into college And she sat on her phone for a couple of hours and rang around all of the medical schools and said, this is who I am. These are my results. I didn't get an offer. Is there anything available? And she had a conversation with Newcastle University, their medical department, and Newcastle said to her, okay, we're interested. She hadn't applied to Newcastle first time round, but we are interested. Newcastle said, can you have an online interview with us tomorrow? And so she was then offered an online interview for the next day. She attended that interview. Because of her excellent A-level grades, she performed well at interview. She got an offer for a place, and then she's just finished her first year of medicine at Newcastle. So it's not something that can be relied on. And it's a little bit of an ad hoc sort of thing. And Newcastle weren't advertising and clearing, but they've always got their eyes open on results day for these people that have, achieved good grades, and they're always looking to cherry pick those. So it's always worth a couple of hours on results day if a student finds himself in that position.
Perfect, thank you. And look, just in the interest of time, let me just give you one last one, unless there are any more out there for final knockings. But you've touched on a lot of this during, so some of this is going to be refresher, but what's the medicine cohort like, specifically at MPW Birmingham? Are there many students each year just for medicine? Is it heavily weighted medicine versus dentistry versus veterinary? And specific enrichment opportunities and trips for these students? You did mention that in the talk, but just a quick reminder, if you don't mind, please.
Yeah, so we do sort of work with our potential medical scientists as a group, and the heart of that is our medical society that caters for students with any interest. So we also get people that are interested in things like biomedical sciences and nursing and so on come along to that. So there is a sort of a collective identity there, but it's the one-to-one that really makes the difference. So the reason why we can successfully cater for that range of interests is because the engine room of the process is one-to-one in those meetings, and it means we can just give completely tailored advice and guidance to the individual, but also they can have that sort of wider wrapper around them that might involve them getting to know dentists and vets and nurses and so on. But our student testimonial that I played to you there, this idea of being a family, we work on a small scale, a sort of a very intimate scale, very, very individual attention. And like I say, if I was to summarize in one sentence what increases someone's chances of being successful in terms of an application to a highly competitive course, that really is the answer, the one-to-one bespoke attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Adam, for all of your time today. If there are no more questions, then I will wind this one down. But of course, if you do have more questions, you are very welcome to be in touch, and either the team or indeed Adam can answer those ones for you. But Adam, thank you. I've lost count as to how many times you've done this webinar now, but I find it increasingly interesting every single time because it is such a political hot potato, the NHS system and all of that. One of my favourite questions has always remained when you try and catch a student out and say, who is the health secretary? But the problem is that catches us out nowadays because that changes every 3 minutes.
All the time, yeah,
so we've given up asking these questions now on the off chance it really backfires. But no, I do appreciate your time enormously to you and to all your team up at MPW Birmingham for everything you do there. Medicine's available in the other MPW sites, but really in terms of a group leader for medicine, Birmingham has forged the way for years, and we sincerely appreciate what you do. So Adam, thank you very much for your time. I will wind this one down at this particular moment in time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We now reach the back end of our 5 weeks worth of lecturing you on various different topics, from where we started out 5 weeks ago with Foundation, through Oxbridge, through a tour of the boarding facilities and the personal tutor side of things here, a refresher and a learning exercise on visas, and through to a modern classic, which is medicine. We've arrived at the back end of our webinar series. thank you very much indeed for your time and your attention, your effort. As I said, if you'd like us to do any more, please let us know. We'll be releasing a few more offcuts over the course of the summer, but we're happy to do anything that you might like. But one note to leave you on, I mean, we live in very strange, very difficult geopolitical times at this moment in time. Suffice to say, please know that we are here and we are a constant. And if ever we can be of use and help and of service, please do let us know. Get in touch. We'd be only too happy to talk to you. But equally, if you're UK based or just coming over to the UK, let us know. Come along, and we're happy to host you in very glorious weather at this moment in time, outside on our roof terrace for a drink and a chat and just really to reconfirm and solidify ties that have been there for so long. Thank you very much indeed. Enjoy your summers until we meet again, and do let us know, all your regional managers, if you need any help in your respective markets. For now, all the very best to you, and thank you from MPW head office.